At 2 in the morning, the little lamp in the room is the only light left on. The glow from the screen is blue. An 18-year-old stares at the video he just uploaded. Views still sit in the single digits. Comments are sparse. Friends tell him to stop, and he only shrugs and says, "I'll upload 100 more." That shrug isn't mere stubbornness. It is the embodiment of a pattern the old fate maps name Bijai, the peer-rob star that marks relentless duplicative action and a willingness to endure attrition. In the nights when nobody watched, Jimmy Donaldson, the man who would become MrBeast, quietly accumulated the kind of time and effort currency that in the end buys probability. In the language of fate, Bijou isn't about inspiration striking once. It's about converting volume into inevitability. He produced and failed and produced again, until the sheer mass of experiments lifted the odds on landing a match with the world's attention. After the slow accumulation of BGA, another pair of energies in his chart began to show themselves. Shishen and Shangguan. Shishen plus Shangguan. Shishen, the food god star, governs creativity, expression, and the capacity to make things tastefully watchable. Shangguan, the wound officer star, brings sharpness, rule-breaking, and dramatic tension. Where Shishen supplies form and allure, Shangguan supplies the edge that pulls people in. In MrBeast's work, those two forces appear together again and again. The long endurance stunts, the absurd yet meticulously staged experiments, the spectacle of handing out massive sums of money, all show a creative engine that's both aesthetic and provocatively transgressive. The result is content that's not only clickable, but emotionally electrical. People are surprised, moved, and compelled to share. And crucially, he did not leave the edge raw. He wrapped the shock in generosity. When a stunt is also a gift, when spectacle is coupled with real, verifiable help, the public's moral alarm is disarmed. In fate terms, this is Shangguan tempered by a protecting influence, what classical readers might call an imprimative support. The sharpness becomes a channel for social value rather than self-consuming bravado. Of course, inner configuration alone never explains why the whole world suddenly notices. For that you need timing, the era's currents that fate technicians call the movement of large cycles, Daun Liunian. Jimmy's early silent years were the accumulation of Bijai, but around 2017 a convergence occurred. Platform algorithms, audience taste, and the industry's willingness to fund risk all shifted toward the kind of hypervisual, emotionally intense content he had been refining. The algorithm's appetite became a wind at his back. His catalogue of experiments supplied the sales at exactly the moment the wind blew. The timing was not mystical so much as structural. Years of small tests gave him repeatable formats the platform could recognize and recommend. The platform's changing priorities provided a multiplier. Early sponsors and partners supplied resources that allowed him to scale. Later, public-facing projects, community-driven campaigns and philanthropy that drew broad media attention operated like an imprimative blessing in the chart, turning personal attention into social trust. After that, as business lines and brands formed, the authority and responsibility axis, the star set known as Guansha pressed inward. Governance, legalities, and institutional control moved from the background to the foreground, shaping how that raw creative force could operate reliably at scale. There is another simple but decisive piece to the picture. The team. In Fate Talk, bijou can mean rivals and peers. In practice, it also describes the people who walk beside you. Chris, Chandler, Carl, and the recurring crew are not mere background faces. They are the practical manifestation of bijou turned into cooperative power. The team took raw ideas and made them executable. They tested logistics, handled safety and cash, managed contracts, and carried the heavy friction of turning imagination into on-the-ground reality. More than that, the ensemble created a group narrative. The audience didn't just follow a stunt, they followed a cast and a set of relationships. In classical destiny terms, they are both peers and helpful stars, the kinds of allies who convert individual momentum into collective scale. Without this network of people, a single viral hit might have remained a fluke. With them, hits became reproducible nodes in a growing machine, and when attention becomes large enough, it must meet a mechanism that converts attention into capital. This is the realm of Piankai, the opportunistic wealth star. Channels that turn exposure into revenue. Sponsorships, product lines, branded restaurants, IP and licensing, competitive events. MrBeast's operation didn't stop at clicks. It routed clicks into brands, snack lines, virtual and real-world restaurants, merchandise, and event products. The strategic dimension is that he designed feedback loops. Content drives awareness. Awareness drives product interest and sales. Sales funds more ambitious content. Piankai is opportunistic by nature. It prospers on openings and windfalls. But in his case, those openings were systematized into repeatable revenue models. It's here that fate language gives a practical warning as well. A strong Piankai brings scale, but also fragility unless governance structures are in place. The very success of those revenue channels creates complexity. Contracts, taxes, supply chains, regulatory exposure. And that is when the Guansha energies have to be activated and integrated. If one reads his trajectory as a pattern of interacting stars, a clear dynamic emerges. BGA creates the sample space. Shishen plus Shangguan create the repeatable attractors inside that space. Piankai turns attention into fuel for the system. The team acts as the social and operational lever, and the larger cycles decide which small discoveries get amplified into public phenomena. This is not a myth about predestination. It is a mechanistic map of tendency and leverage. The chart shows predispositions, not inevitabilities. But when predispositions meet preparation and external windows, probability becomes story. That story also explains why generosity is not merely optics for him, but an integral structural device. The acts of giving, the large-scale donations, the tangible assistance, the transparent philanthropic campaigns, do more than produce viral moments. They convert spectacle into social capital. In fate terms, generosity functions like an imprimative stabilizer for an otherwise sharp Shangguan. It supplies moral legitimacy, enlarges the audience's willingness to forgive the stunt-like edges, and turns fleeting novelty into something that feels meaningful. When viewers see a shock that consequences in a concrete benefit, they are not merely entertained. They feel part of a larger moral scene and tend to share and endorse the content. The social rituals that emerge, mass tree plantings, community donations, operate as durable nodes connecting entertainment to civic action. The result is a loop where spectacle begets social goodwill, which begets distribution and partnership possibilities, which in turn fund larger spectacle. Yet the fate map also warns of perils. Scale produces governance problems and reputational fragility. The mix of high-cost programming and public generosity means contracts, tax rules, labor considerations, and PR issues are no longer optional. Where a single stunt in early years could be improvised, at large scale, every action requires legal review, safety protocols, and contingency plans. The Guansha dynamic reminds us that authority and constraint are the shadow that accompanies influence. To sustain influence, you must build the institutions that can bear it. Without that stabilizing architecture, a single misstep can ripple outward into structural damage. Read another way. Jimmy's arc is a case study in how certain configurations of personal tendency and public infrastructure interact. Bijie gave him the appetite for iteration. Shishen and Shangguan gave him the creative grammar of spectacle. Pian Kai gave him the circuits to monetize attention. The team actualized the work. Timing supplied the catalytic conditions. The lamp that burned in the small room was not an omen handed from the heavens. It was a practical instrument, kept lit through long habit and careful tuning of variables. Fate, in this reading, is not fatalism. It is a map of leverage points. When the pieces aligned, the effect looked instantaneous to outsiders. One clip, one stunt, a spike in subscribers, a wave of media attention. But the chart reveals the deep timescale behind the apparent surprise. The overnight hit is almost always the visible tip of a submerged iceberg of iteration, partnership, monetary plumbing, and cyclical coincidence. He had amassed the sample space, engineered the content attractors, trained a machine to execute at scale, and kept one eye on the marketplace's taste shifts. When the platform's currents matched his patterns, the whole system rode the swell. If we treat his life as a living diagram, the lessons are descriptive rather than prescriptive. You can see how tendencies map to leverage. Relentless output builds probability. Dramatic, value-oriented formats build shareability. Integrated monetization makes extravagance sustainable. Steady social bonds keep the creator functional under pressure. And timely external shifts convert latent readiness into public success. The life of Jimmy Donaldson reads as a contemporary fate case. A constellation of durable human habits, creative innovations, relational scaffolds, and commercial mechanisms that, when synchronized with wider cultural and technological rhythms, produced an outcome we call a miracle. But from the vantage of the map, the miracle is a legible result. The momentary unfolding of a configuration that had been quietly assembled in the dark.